Right, back on this thing. Last week we saw it actually start, really, much to my surprise. I did not stage that at all, that was ridiculous. Next hopeful thing is if it has any forward gears at all. These guys are synonymous for having terrible gearboxes, but that's mostly coupled with people's terrible driving styles. So hopefully getting into third gear today would be a plus, because that's probably the gear that you lose first. So we'll see, we'll have a bit of a poke around, and then if we can do that, we'll maybe end the video there, or I'll run through a few of the future projects we've got going on the channel. Yeah, we've got heaps of other Pulsars to deal with, so we'll see what we can do. Still amazes me that this thing starts. And we'll see if we can get gears. Gears in it, but I was actually just pushing it in because the clutch does this. And if you haven't driven a manual before, it's not meant to do that. Alright, the switch is off because I'm going to die of carbon monoxide poisoning and see what we can do next. I lied before, there are a few other things we can do. Classic issue with GTIRs, you always have the brake lights stuck on. Sometimes it's the switch that's right up the back here, brake light switch. So if you ever have any brake on issues, I'd probably look there first. Sort of run you through underneath the GTIR if you hadn't seen under it before. So all-wheel drive. So you've got the gearbox here, and the transfer case bolts onto that. So it bolts in, it's got a shaft that runs that way into the gearbox, and then it connects to the tail shaft. These center bearings flog out sometimes. And a lot of people recently are starting to get cracks in their fuel tanks. To do that, you pretty much have to drop the rear subframe out to get the fuel tank out. It's not too hard. You've got 4 big bolts here, and then you've also got the bushings inside there as well. So those are press fit bushings. It's a pretty good upgrade to do that. Diff's pretty good. Rarely heard of a diff going, because it's I believe it's a 60-40 split. So you get 60% of the power at the front, 40% at the rear. Got a sweet Varex exhaust that's way too big and way too loud. That doesn't come standard, obviously. It's got some coilovers, which is a pretty good deal. So D2 coilovers, probably chuck them in my red car. Pretty simple car to work on, really. That's why I got into them. It's got an aftermarket downpipe, which I think I mentioned in a previous video. So CES is a pretty good brand to deal with. Doesn't have that as standard, so I think that's been a bit of an aftermarket addition. Same with being punched in on the sump, but that's not too bad. You can just flatten that back out. So yeah, pretty simple under here. And same front brakes as SSS N15s as well. So if you ever have seized calipers, you can try and get SSS N15 front calipers. So they're a little bit newer and they shouldn't have as many issues. But yeah, not a bad little car underneath. All right, since we got that out of the way, I'll go through a bit of a fleet update and probably the projects that I'll have on the channel coming up. Got my $50 Falcon that I got from the auctions. So it's just got the standard single overhead in it. Was going to do the classic barra swap, but I think I'm just going to go the cooler route and just turbo this. You know, it's got 200,000 Ks on the clock, so what could go wrong? So in lieu of cleaning it or doing anything, I decided to get some 330mm rotors with some GT uprights and some BA calipers, and of course some extra heavy D-shaped steelies just to be cool. And that's about it. Ordered some Heltec parts off ECS Customs or ECS Solutions. Got Hooten's harnesses to do me a conversion or a patch loom. So that's probably the next thing we'll do after a couple of the GTIRs, or maybe even during, because I can't pay attention to one thing at one time. Next project on the chopping block, got my red GTIR. It's got a factory sunroof. Pretty rare to have this colour and this sunroof combination. It's a 2.2 front runner motorsport. Do front and rear pitch rods. So they're pretty good for engine torque and twisting. So go for that if you've got some issues with that. So I had custom made manifold 3071 turbo, running 98, doing about 250 kilowatts at the moment. We'll be upgrading to the G series Garrett turbo, running individual coil on plugs and doing a few fabrication work. I'll send that off to EC Solutions, so he'll be able to work his magic, do some welding as well, because I wasn't happy with how the intercooler hole was cut. So I'll go flex fuel on this, hopefully around 300 kilowatts. Got a PAR gearbox in it, probably going to go Heltec 1500, and then take this ECU out and put it in the next project. So not a bad car, but needs some love. She's looking a bit sad. She used to be pretty nice back in the day, but yeah, sort of let it fall by the wayside. After all the mechanical's done, I'll take it in to get it a respray, same colour. 1984 Nissan Pulsar, used to be an Australia Post vehicle. Used to have an 1.3 litre carburetted, but then I switched it over to fuel injected ET turbo motor out of I think an 86 model. Running alright, then had a bit of a catastrophic issue with some wiring. The catastrophic part was I did some wiring and everything started catching on fire. So when you see white smoke, it's not a good thing. So it's probably the next project on the go after all the GTIRs are done. So a bit on this year. And under all that is another GTIR. So kids, if you don't have drive shafts in your hubs, don't pull the car around, because the hub will just pop straight out and your bearings will go everywhere. This one is due to get the motor out of the other shell we're tinkering with at the moment. It's been resprayed, sort of a blue colour. I don't mind the colour. It's not the factory colour, but it's not too bad. So yeah, a few things to fiddle around with it. A few parts to put on. Parts going everywhere. Yeah, it's a pretty clean example though. So that should be the next thing to go up on the hoist after we finish with this skeleton of a shell.